So recently I've been learning React, so I have a few questions and let me tell them via an example. So let's say if you want to make a notes app, right? So you want to make a notes app, right? So what you do is you make a page and right, so it has all the notes. Let's say this is your heading and then it contains one note, two note and so on. ठीक है? Checkboxes भी हैं. Yeah, for to-do list, this can be a to-do list, right? So yeah, so these are your notes, and then you want to add a note, right? Because you want to add that functionality, else it's useless. So let's say you make a functionality of add a note. So all of this is happening in one component, right? So this is one component. So there is only one state which is holding. State is basically the data that the component can hold uh, between rendering, and yeah, so this is all in one component. But then you learn that it's a better practice to make a component of everything and do not stuff everything in one component and make different components for different features and stuff like that. So let's say um, when you add a note, you want another page to appear. So then there are many choices. Now let's say if you're not working with a database, so this is like just a state and not going through a database. So you will have a main file, right? So this would be app.js, right? This is also actually a component, but we are going to nest every component inside this. So this is app.js, and let's say one page you have is display all notes. So these are basically notes, right? So and one side here is basically this is for add note, right? Okay. So this is to add, and this is basically printing all notes. So this is just reading, and this is update adding, right? Post update. So yeah, so there are now if you don't have a database, then what you'll do is basically bring the state of the nodes to the app.js, because both of them are using the same state, right? If this is updating anything or adding anything, then the state of this is changing. And the benefit of this is that when this thing changes the state of its parent, that is this, then this component also re-renders, right? So if this re-renders, then we don't have to do anything. And let me tell you the difference of using a database. Now you again have an app.js, and you have a notes here, and you have an add, right? Add functionality. And now the problem is you can bring the state to here or you cannot, because every component can ask the state from the database, right? Because let's say here is a database. So let's say you wanted to add something, you will make a post request through this component, right? And change the data in the database. And then whenever you want to see all the notes, you can go to the database and fetch it. Now I want to know that if we are using this database, then should we make our state available in app.js or not? Like, you can actually even ignore this, because everyone is getting the data from the database, so there is a single source of truth. And so we don't have to lift our state up. In this case, we have to do a lot of hard work in actually lifting the state up first. Or even if you were doing it from the start and you don't have to refactor your code, then also you will have to provide functions, right? So this will have some functions to update the state accordingly, and then you'll have to pass these functions as props to this both of these components, right? So that these components can change its state, and they will just call this function to change the state. And so this option requires a lot of hard work and lifting the state up and refactoring. And but this way of doing things is much easier because each component can have its state and get its state from the database, right? So it can get the data and then add, or it doesn't even need to get the data, it just wants to make a post request, right? So it can just make a post request, and then whenever you want to get the notes, you can get it. Now the problem is that, let's say you have both of these components on the same page, like you are not reloading, or let's say you are not changing the path of your URL, right? So then both of these components are on the same page. So there is no way, after doing some operation in add, you can force this component to re-render. So if they are on the same page, then the nodes will not have your add operation until and unless it is re-rendered. And there is no way you can re-render this, because the state of this is not changing, because it has its own state. Only the data in the database is changing, and it's not looking for the changes in the database, right? So this is one problem. And a second problem can be that making this API calls is actually really costly or time consuming. And let's say this has 1 million data, then 1 million nodes, then calling this function again and again for this nodes is going to be really heavy. So like you're not even leaving the site, but it has to re-render all these 1 million nodes again and again. But if we store the state in this app.js, then we'll just update it inside this, and once we are done, but then we'll have to, when the person leaves the site, whatever changes the state app.js has, we'll have to make a post request to the server before leaving. And that is like, why would you do that before leaving only, right? Okay, so there can be some use cases where this needs to update for sure, but in some cases this actually can wait, right? You can just say that we have updated, but we can still wait for it to change the data. And one thing is that even if we send a post request here, or put a delete request, we can actually not re-render nodes component and just show that we have made a post request and this data has changed if it returns 200 or fulfilled. And basically, and then we can display the nodes and change the state accordingly, right? So we are still making a request of post, but we are not making a get request, which is kind of costly, right? So I don't know which of these things should I do, right?